This show with Yogani is Bhakti and Karma Yoga Part 9 on the Path to Enlightenment series. So stay tuned for this next hour where we are going to take a deeper look at what parts Bhakti and Karma Yoga play on this exciting path of freedom. I'd like to welcome Yogani again back for Part 9 on our Path to Enlightenment series. Yogani, it's great to have you back again.
It's good to be back, Dr. Ann. Thank you.
Now, today's Part 9 is Bhakti and Karma Yoga. So maybe we could start by looking at desire and action, which I guess is the root of Bhakti. Can you explain what this looks like on our spiritual path?
Yes, the first decision that was made was putting those two things together in one book,
Yes.
Bhakti and Karma Yoga, and the reason for that is because the two are closely related. Bhakti, for those who don't know, means the path of devotion. But we take a very pragmatic approach to it in AYP. We begin just with the word desire, and there is a difference between desire and devotion. And we recognize that desire is the source of all action, and karma means action and its consequences. So what we're looking at is desire and how it leads to action, and how that relationship between desire and action can be cultivated and optimized in ways that can help us on our path to enlightenment.
When we talk about Bhakti and desire and action, we need to have the desire to have the action in meditation and in yoga. So we were just talking off the record about sometimes losing that desire through, I was saying, my spiritual path of 17 years, I felt kind of stuck. I felt that I wasn't really moving forward. And what's the risk of that happening in this case?
Well, obviously, desire is what brings us to the spiritual path to begin with, although we could feel that we are forced to it in some cases where we're experiencing adversity in life and we feel we just have to do something. Nevertheless, it's a desire that grows out of a circumstance or our perception of our life that leads us to the path. And once we're on the path, we'll begin some sort of a practice, and that's on the action side. And should be emphasized that without desire, there can't be any action. And likewise, without action, desire is really just spinning its wheels or running down into something that's not going to amount to very much. Now, if our action is not providing some sort of perception of progress, which is what you're just talking about,
yes,
that can feed back into our desire. So there is that need for a perception of progress. And that's a tricky area because what is spiritual progress? Who can define what that is? I guess if the person feels more happiness coming and more productivity in life, that certainly is, if it's not objective, at least it's a very solid subjective experience. And so everything we've done in AYP is to try and provide the thread all the way through from desire to practice, and then some perception that we're getting somewhere with it. The three go together.
For me, the sense of advancing on a path, the sense of actually being able to tap into my intuition and a sense of knowing, or the lack of fear being in my life or anxiety would show me that I'm progressing.
Yeah. But those don't come out of nowhere, do they? There has to be some kind of a cause. And then it gets back to what your practice is, which I think is really the anchor. Bhakti and Karma Yoga, it's a wonderful relationship of dynamics that occurs within us. But if we don't have some sort of systematic approach, some sort of anchor in our daily life, such as a sitting practice like deep meditation, the whole thing can kind of float around, if you know what I mean. Bhakti by itself is a spiritual practice. So if we're not connecting that to some practice like meditation or pranayama or some other structured practice, then at least bhakti will require some kind of ritual, some sort of worship, which is obviously the most common form that bhakti takes in the spiritual traditions. So
yes.
My point is, if you're wondering, well, what's happening in my life? Am I more sensitive? Am I more happy? Am I more sad or whatever? That really gets back to your practices, and then your practices are really dependent on your desire to do those practices. And so there's a very intimate relationship there. And I think maybe structured practice gets left out of the equation more often than it should.
What about those people that really have a hard time with structure?
Well, if they have strong bhakti, they're going to be devotional, and they're going to be directing their devotion toward their chosen ideal. And this really gets us to talking about some of the inner workings of bhakti. We mentioned that desire leads to action. If our desire is scattered all over the place, our action is going to be scattered all over the place. If we have a vision of our life or our chosen ideal, which in Sanskrit is the word ishta, and if someone who has strong bhakti, they're by definition they are going to have a vision or an ideal, and it's entirely a personal thing. It could be the icon of their religion, whether it's Jesus or Yahweh or Allah or whatever, and that alone can provide a means for desire to express itself in action. And in those cases, the action could be purely devotional and ritualistic. So for people who have a lot of bhakti and don't like structured practice, that's generally the direction they tend to go in the devotional, worshipful type activities. And that's spiritual practice. In fact, that's the oldest and most common form of spiritual practice in the world, what we find in the religions. In AYP, we take a more personal approach. In fact, we call it bhakti, up close and personal, where your chosen ideal may or may not correspond with the traditional religious icons. It may be more along the lines of trying to find out, who am I? Or why am I here? Or what's going on inside me? What's this energy, this dynamic going on inside me? All of those things can become a part of one's chosen ideal. And whatever it is, that chosen ideal, that's where the desire gets directed. And as the desire becomes more flowing and steady toward that chosen ideal, that's when we call it bhakti. Bhakti is a flowing of desire toward a chosen ideal. And then that enables us to move forward into whatever type of practices we may be drawn to.
Does AYP get involved in any type of ritual?
Not really, not in terms of anything that's defined. And I'm sort of hemming a little bit and hawing a little bit because everybody has their own ritual.
Yes.
Everybody, some people are extremely ritualistic, or perhaps devotional is the better word, about just sitting on the meditation seat.
Yes.
So AYP certainly does not discourage people from pursuing the ritual that is their life and that is their path. And that can be a formal path in one of the religions. The techniques that are taught in AYP are totally compatible with any religious path. Or it can be very personal. Just one person pursuing their own chosen ideal, sitting on their meditation seat every day.
And we don't need an
ideal. So the
ideal.
ritual isn't structured, but it's there on the personal level.